Welcome to the Philanthropy and the New Urbanism panel today. My name is Rob Steuteville. I'm editor and publisher of Better Cities and Towns, the print publication and website that covers this, the trend of new urbanism and smart growth. And I'm really pleased to be here today. In the last 15 years, we're seeing a real blossoming of the support among philanthropic organizations for improving the built environment. This support includes transit-oriented development, revitalization of towns and city neighborhoods, zoning reform and urban plans, how to ensure social equity and smart growth efforts, improving the standards for urban design and architecture, and community outreach and education, and as well as arts and culture in urban places. As you look around the country, there are perhaps 100 foundations that are doing work in the built environment. And this is a good thing because in many cases, governmental resources are drying up. Just in today's paper, there are stories about concerns over mobility and energy and the economy, and they all relate in some way to the built environment. As I was walking over today and trying to cross that enormous boulevard from the Marriott Hotel, I was thinking that the built environment affects everybody, rich and poor, young and old, urban and suburban. But there's a classic chicken and the egg problem. If you revitalize a place, the economics of that place generally improve. But it takes money to get there. When there's little or no money, it's hard for government officials to justify spending on plans and zoning reform and streetscape improvements and all the things that help make a better built environment. So there's a key role that philanthropic organizations can play in bridging that gap. This panel features top philanthropic leaders sharing their views of urbanism as a key factor in transformational change. These leaders will discuss how they make decisions that help their foundations meet their goals. We have three distinguished panelists: Richard Oram of the Oram Foundation and the Fund for the Environment and Urban Life, Jerry Maldonado of the Ford Foundation, and Richard Driehaus of the Richard H. Driehaus Foundation. All three panelists will give a brief presentation, and then there will be questions from me, and then as time allows, we will open it up to questions from the audience. So as they speak, you should think of questions that you would like to ask. Starting off will be Richard Oram, and a federal and local government employee, consultant, and entrepreneur for 35 years. Richard Oram developed a reputation in the transit industry as an innovator. As affairs and marketing expert, he assisted nearly 100 North American public agencies and municipalities and earned a 1982 U.S. Department of Transportation Outstanding Public Service Award. Credited as creator of Transit Check Vouchers, a mass market method for tax-free employer-provided transit benefits, he founded Commuter Check Corp. To deliver transit benefits nationally. He now chairs the Fund for the Environment and Urban Life, focused on planning and development innovation. He has degrees in business and economics from Lehigh University and urban planning from the London School of Economics. His doctoral work on transportation economics was published in the U.S. and U.K. He authored 5 books and numerous articles, and co-founded Sun Farm Network, an innovative New Jersey solar energy company. So please welcome Richard Oram.
Hi there. Happy to talk. I'm very happy to be here. CNU's a favorite organization, and it's become a highlight of my year to come to the CNU congresses. I'll tell you a little bit about our foundation. and introduce you to the people involved. Notice on the far right, there's a good friend of ours, Jerry Ford. Jerry Maldonado. That in fact is at one of our retreats, which was held in the New York area. We have an advisory board, the folks in the center. I'm very proud of our advisors. We get together once a year and set general direction. That's what we do. Now here's two of my favorite ladies, Margaret Mead and Jane Jacobs, of course. Everyone knows what they did. Remember what Margaret Mead said: never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. And then Jane Jacobs, of course, did that. Right? We know her book, but her book was also the product of the work that she did fighting Robert Moses in New York and organizing people in the village to stop Lomax, the Lower Manhattan Expressway, which would have destroyed New York the same way that the Cross Bronx Highway destroyed the Bronx. What some people don't know about Jane Jacobs was that her work was funded, her book was funded by an $18,000 grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. Now let me tie that back. Never doubt that a small amount of money can change the world. So, who we are. We're a new foundation, and we're a very small foundation. Established just 6 years ago, really. Rob explained my own background is in transportation. When I was 21 years old, I was working for the Federal Transit Administration right out of college. Nixon's picture was on the wall in the first few days that I started working there. My experience with transit and transit benefits was a good focus and way to operationalize my longstanding environmental principles and that which formed me as a child, really. Talk about that. I learned urban planning in school, but then never really got that focused on planning, went back to transit and became an entrepreneur and became successful at that. Our business was very successful on the West Coast, and I developed relationships with folks there. And in fact, our foundation now has something of a bipolar or bi-coastal nature from the West Coast and the East Coast, but then international, as I'll explain to you as well. So a number of people on our advisory board from the West Coast, but I live in New York. I raised 2 kids in Manhattan. I'm a transit person. A good friend of mine on our advisory board is also a almost 50-year veteran of the Canadian transit industry. Another good friend of mine is an environmental leader in Oxford. We had our retreat there this past fall. And perhaps the advisor that I'm most proud of, a man named Günter Schlusche, is from Berlin, and he is the architect and planner who is currently working on the German memorial to the Cold War and Berlin Wall. And before that, perhaps even more important, he was the planner who directed the creation of the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, which is right across from the Reichstag and the Brandenburg Gate in the center of Berlin. I recommend a trip to Berlin from anyone who's interested in urbanism or history. What we focus on is being very, very focused. Our budget is minimal, really, relative to foundations. This is not a lot of money, $500,000 that we give away. We receive hundreds of inquiries, dozens every month. We only fund 6 to 8 projects a year. We give away some small contributions, but increasingly we're focused on a relative few number of topics. Increasingly, we're also focused on CNU's agenda. We're always raising the bar on what we fund. If you will, when I was fresh to this, we were finding a lot of opportunities in general areas, exploring, if you will, and our advisory board has more diverse experience, but increasingly we're getting that much more focused. We're always evolving, for that matter. What we were 6 months ago is not what we are now, and is not what we'll be in 6 months. Networking, working with Jerry and others from the Rockefeller Foundation and a number of other foundations, larger and smaller ones, has really inspired me. I've learned more in the last 5 years than I did in the previous 15. Our strategy is to be very strategic. We do not fund things that are flash in the pan. We look for things that are leveraged. We look for partnering. We look to do seed funds. Jerry and I were just talking, sometimes because of our scale, we can fund something that's very new and very small and let it be proven, and then the big boys might pick it up. That's part of our partnership. We like communications activities, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. We tend not to focus projects that are just local. As good as they may be, something that's going to improve this city isn't good enough. We look for things that are going to be broader in their impact. I use the baseball analogies in quite a few ways. We have a Babe Ruth approach. Babe Ruth hit a lot of home runs, but he also struck out an awful lot. People don't know that. We don't mind swinging for the fences, right, and looking for the grand slam even, bearing in mind that you strike out, that some grand efforts just won't connect. I mentioned communications, and I want to draw your attention to someone who's speaking here at CNU. Stick around. On Saturday night, Dick Jackson, who is a former head, even a senior person at the Center for Disease Control, has produced a video series that is about to air on PBS, and it is really inspiring. We found out about this. His basic message is that the public health problems now are, of course, not tuberculosis and infectious diseases of the 19th and early 20th century, but the public health problems are now obesity and hypertension and diabetes and isolation, he calls it, or depression. And all of this relates right back to land use. You know, this is what we're doing to ourselves. One of our projects, in fact, look around, you'll find them in various places, a little postcard that looks like this. One of the things that we've done is to make his message widely available. Using a special code that you'll find on that card, you can purchase his DVD set, which is normally $100 for $20. That's the kind of thing that we like to do, something that is good and needs to get out further. Another example of that, and you maybe find floating around here in your registration packet, a video series that was done by a favorite group of ours, a very small group in New York called Street Films. So they produced little 4-minute videos that tally up to about 40 minutes, perfect for an hour's class in college or in high school. And indeed, another part of this, also on the DVD, is a PDF of a high school curriculum. So these are about contemporary transit topics, moving beyond the automobile, urban transportation. These are good examples of things that we do, small investments that can have a firecracker impact, if you will. Another one, and this is a group in San Francisco Planning and Urban Research. They created Parklets, which are the conversion of 2 or 3 parking spaces on the street, outside perhaps a coffee shop, and that, if you will, can enliven a neighborhood, and you put some planting and benches there, and they've had a great deal of success. There are now hundreds of these that have been spawned in San Francisco and elsewhere in the Bay Area. Well, these are some of the other projects I'll just mention very quickly, but these are all rear-view mirror, if you will. What we've done is probably not what we're going to do. We're very proud of the story of Stuff. If some of you haven't seen that, it's a great short video by a woman, Annie Leonard, who tells you all about stuff, everything in the world, where it comes from, where it goes, all the damage along the way, why we consume so much, and all of the political and economic and environmental problems. That's great, storyofstuff.org. Green Faith is another of our favorite organizations. This is a group that merges the environmental movement and the faith movement, which I think is really powerful. If you will, the right wing, the red people could maybe convert a little bit to being green, maybe not all the way to blue. but we think that there's a real opportunity to speak to an audience that otherwise doesn't hear the messages that we like to convey. LeadND is something that we've supported. Pace University did a number of case studies on LeadND. Also, we've created a communication vehicle in New York called the TOD News, which is just emerging. We've been supporting congestion pricing in New York. You'll see we're getting more focused in the New York area. A campaign for better transport, however, is in England, where we're trying to change the tax laws to be similar to what my business was, what the U.S. tax code allows employers to subsidize or have tax-free employee parking. Or employee transit comparable to parking, if you will. We're offsetting the problem of free parking. If I had to digest the single largest problem in urban transportation, it's parking. It's parking, way too much of it. We're constantly raising the bar on what we do, though, and those are some projects. So now we're working with CNU. It's really an excellent match with us. The more work we do, the closer we get. We sponsored the Charter Awards this year, and last year we sponsored a marketing endeavor by CNU a couple years ago, just generally to raise the profile of CNU. I'm most excited about what I call the Fannie Mae 20% rule, what CNU is calling now the Live, Work, Walk. This takes me into what's really important for foundations, which is affordable housing, if you will. There are a number of other ways to talk about the federal financing barriers, but from the philanthropic point of view, and as Jerry will pick up, housing for middle and lower income people is really, really very important. If we can get more 2-, 3-, and 4-story buildings built that include housing, that is naturally going to meet the social housing needs or affordable housing needs. Concentrated poverty, affordable housing buildings, the extreme Robert Moses type buildings, are not the answer for affordable housing. Most of the people below the poverty level, in fact, do not live in publicly supported housing per se. I can talk about that at length, and that's one of the most exciting things that I'm involved with. In fact, I'm putting my own energy, not just our funding, into that. We're also supporting the freeway teardown project. Removing the Sheridan Expressway in the Bronx would be a great way to finally revitalize the Bronx. We've also supported a number of CNU personalities and endeavors, the Katz Foundation, Jeff Speck, Mike Lydon, Emily Talin, have all gotten very modest amounts of support from us. Maybe some of you remember the video done last year about Sprawlanta, and we helped with that too. Foundations like to take risks, but they're also risk averse, and that's something that requires some consideration with regards to the CNU interface. There are so many portals, however, for the environmental movement, for the philanthropic movement to find ways to support CNU's mission. Many foundations, dozens and dozens, hundreds perhaps, foundations are in the environmental area, the environmental justice area, the social justice, transportation, smart growth, community development, TOD. These are all angles that, or portals, if you will, for CNU's concerns to be supported by the philanthropic community. But I'm just saying there's some barriers. The philanthropic community and CNU are not a great link. Some of them are very skeptical. They see an organization like CNU and developers and architects and the elites as not necessarily being what foundations want to support. CNU is not seen as a nonprofit. Developers are not some nonprofit. And planning focus that CNU has, well, that's a government focus, and foundations don't like to support what government does. Displacement and housing and new urbanism causes the disruption of housing community or housing for middle-income people. Takes me back to the 20% rule. And also CNU is a membership organization, and foundations are not that keen on supporting membership organizations. Nonetheless, there's many hundreds, I believe, of foundations that could support CNU. CNU needs to validate itself and to get more access to the philanthropic community. There are opportunities, but CNU needs to make the case and deliver on their message and understand what the foundations care about. If I had to highlight one, it's affordable housing. We should be inviting more foundations to come to CNU. We should be giving them free registrations, though they don't need it. We should be getting more foundations to come. And legacy gifts. So many of the CNU founders are now getting older, so we could talk about legacy gifts as well. That's all I'll talk about, but anyone who's interested, I invite you to look at enviro-urban.org. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Richard. Jerry Maldonado is a program officer with the Ford Foundation, which is a national charitable foundation based in New York, founded through the wealth that was derived from the Ford Motor Company. He helps manage the Ford Foundation's investments in affordable housing, regional economic development, and planning and land use innovation in metropolitan regions across the country. His grant-making concentrates on integrated regional strategies for building stronger communities by improving access for low-income families to permanently affordable housing, reducing blight, improving transit choices, and strengthening decent work opportunities. Jerry joined the Ford Foundation in 2008 as a program manager overseeing the Foundation's post-Katrina Gulf Coast transformation efforts. He has a master's degree in public policy and international affairs from Columbia University and a bachelor's degree from Brown University, where he concentrated in international relations and urban studies. Welcome, Jerry Maldonado.
Thanks a lot. Let me just kind of adjust this for a second. All right. So first I wanted to say thank you, John, for having me here today. Thank you, Richard, for being a great collaborator and co-conspirator on many things that we're working on. It's really fantastic to be here. So I want to talk a little bit about the work of the Ford Foundation. As a social justice foundation, Ford is really committed to addressing the structural inequalities that impede equitable development of metropolitan regions. As such, we aspire not only for the creation of dense, walkable, sustainable communities, but we also aspire for the creation of just communities in metropolitan regions that really advance opportunity for all. And so to get us going this morning, I wanted to share with you a brief video that highlights some of the key challenges that our unit is really trying to address.
Across the ages, people have been drawn to cities, centers of power, protection, and privilege, but also places of crime, corruption, and crushing poverty. Today, over half the world's people live in cities, drawn by the promise of prosperity. But do our swelling metropolitan regions really deliver on that promise? Do they offer opportunity to all? Or does urban development more often than not mean exclusion, where the elites control growth and opportunity, equality, and sustainability are merely slogans? What's our vision of the ideal city? Is it ambitious and competitive? Or does it promote fairness and equity, lifting the lives of all? We believe it can and should be both. That means building affordable housing, strong schools, transportation that connects people to jobs, green spaces and civic places. It means city and suburbs as one thriving whole, and it means involving people in the decisions and plans that affect them. Welcome to the future, to a place that fulfills our highest aspirations, to a place we can choose to create. Welcome to the just city.
And so really modest aspirations we have, you know? But as emphasized in the video, really the goal of the Metropolitan Opportunity Program at the Foundation is to promote the creation of an environmentally sustainable, economically competitive, equitable and inclusive cities and metropolitan regions. And we firmly believe that equity is the superior growth model, and that regions that are more equitable, that invest in physical, human, and social capital are actually more competitive. We believe that everyone, no matter where they live, should have the opportunity to be part of a quality community characterized by decent, affordable housing options, quality transformation, and good jobs. Now, of course, realizing this vision is obviously much easier said than done. And so our unit really strives to address a number of key challenges that we think undermine regional sustainability and equity, including, first and foremost, the challenge of white flight and suburban sprawl that's really sapped the vitality of urban cores in many metro regions. And what this image captures is the population density of Cleveland in 1948, which had roughly about 1.4 million people. While the Cleveland area population has stayed roughly the same over the past 60 years, it's spread out, so that the same population now lives on twice the land area, increasing spatial segregation and deepening a host of environmental and economic challenges. Suburban sprawl and deindustrialization has also intensified spatial concentration of poverty. And it's interesting to note that the number of low-income people living in high poverty areas has increased 40% since 2000. And as a result, in many communities, place has become a proxy for race. And where you live too often determines your opportunities for social mobility, your educational attainment, and even life expectancy. And simultaneously, vacant, blighted, and foreclosed buildings scar the landscape due to the Great Recession, straining municipal budgets and leaving many local governments on the brink of bankruptcy. And if that all weren't enough, underinvestment in public infrastructure and transportation has resulted in massive traffic congestion, exacerbating environmental problems and costing American households and businesses hundreds of millions of dollars in wasted productivity. And so what do we try to do about these massive challenges? First, Ford's programming is really rooted in the recognition that today these problems don't just affect inner cities, that cities and suburbs share common challenges, that they form part of a regional economy and face complex challenges that defy simple solutions. That metro areas are networks of interconnected communities that share a common destiny. And that piece, that common destiny is really critical, because I think what's happened is that we've bifurcated cities and suburbs and we've left cities on their own, right, to live or die on their own. And so that's a key shift in our thinking, right, is that cities don't survive on their own, but that strong cities really represent the core of a strong regional economy. And so to address these challenges, we really believe that a regional approach is needed. And so the Metropolitan Opportunity Unit's program at the Ford Foundation really focuses on this nexus between the physical, social, and policy environment. While we aim to reduce sprawl, protect green spaces, and reinvest in the urban core, our focus really is specific. We look at the ways in which investments in the built environment can either perpetuate or relieve pre-existing structural inequalities. And we do this by investing in strategies that help first deconcentrate poverty, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because Richard, you talked about the way in which we had concentrated poverty in the past through housing and other infrastructure investments, and that's a key part of the work that we're doing. The second is to offer more diverse housing choices throughout the region, and again, affordable housing throughout the region, really looking at regional fair share housing and how housing is connected to workforce opportunities. And the third is to support quality public transportation options that connect individuals and families and households to job clusters. And we do this through three different initiatives. The first is expanding access to quality housing. And as part of this work, the goal of this work is really to promote quality, affordable housing throughout the metropolitan region. In the past, the foundation has been a real key leader in community development. We helped create the community development field and CDFIs and supported the Community Reinvestment Act. But we've also learned, from 30 years of experience, that a block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood approach to community development isn't enough to really, address some of the real broad systemic challenges. And then often what we did by working on kind of the hardest neighborhoods and focusing on increasing affordable housing in those hardest neighborhoods was really to actually deepen regional inequalities. And so our goal here is really to look at the ways in which affordable housing, again, broadly throughout the region, are connected to transportation and job networks. In the short term, our strategy really focuses on accelerating the reuse of vacant and foreclosed properties and expanding housing and tenure alternatives for low and moderate income households, and increasing the regional supply of affordable housing and workforce housing so that we don't replicate that concentration of poverty that we think has undermined the competitiveness of our inner city core. A second key strategy is around promoting metropolitan land use innovation. And the goal of this work is to promote innovative land use and community planning strategies that create quality communities in metro areas. And we're working in 10 metropolitan areas across the country, a combination of weak and strong markets. In strong markets, we're really working to ensure that development happens without displacement, and that there is a supply of quality housing throughout the region, again, through inclusionary housing ordinances, density bonuses for affordable housing, and targeted land acquisition strategies. In weaker markets, we're focusing on eliminating blight by acquiring abandoned properties through community-driven redevelopment strategies and helping cities make better decisions around their use of available land. And our third initiative is around connecting people to opportunity. And at the national level, we're supporting research and advocacy that helps make the case for improving public transit rather than building more roads and bridges. And at the regional level, we're supporting regional coalitions that, again, are advancing a series of integrated community planning strategies. And just to give you a sense of where we're working, this is a map of the Foundation's 10 metros. We are, again, the largest place-based unit at the Foundation, working in 10 metros across the country. Our total investments between 2010 and 2013 has been about $160 million. We've invested about $76 million at the national level, $62 million in metropolitan regions, and about $24 million in program-related investments, which are low-interest loans that are really dedicated to identifying specific opportunities that can be scaled. And so, working nationally in 10 metros across the country, we're hoping to shape a new vision for urban revitalization. And so, to bring it all home, I wanted to end with another video clip that captures a convening, actually, that we hosted at the Foundation earlier this year for our 75th anniversary, and a number of you were there. And so this kind of summarizes, it brought together a number of key practitioners, lead thinkers, and policymakers to articulate how they thought an equity agenda could be reconciled with a new urban revitalization agenda. So.
This is a critical time, a time when we face the challenge of shaping a vision to guide the growth of our cities into a future of fairness, opportunity, and equity.
The only way you can be more efficient, the only way you can be a better place for growth, job development, quality of life, is if in fact you are a just city.
Cities don't compete globally, metros do. And so we have a big competition within the United States. Who will create a cohesive, intentional, purposeful, deliberate metropolitan strategy?
None of the communities south of Camden wanted this rail line because they said all the crime from Camden's got. Now, I mean, how many robbers stop to get the train in the schedule? I'm sorry, they got to wait and get out. It was ridiculous. There was enormous pushback. Now that rail line is full. What's happened is that suburbs along the line, the businesses, the property values have gone up. The businesses are doing more business.
All these cities all around the world, you know what they got in common? Homeless. Every one of them got homeless. And I mean, especially, I'm not going to lie, like I look at Latinos in this country, it's like, like we're about to be the majority in like 2 weeks. First of all, I'm from Brooklyn. But saying me personally, I come from a culture and an art form that wouldn't exist without cities, you feel me? So that's why I'm here with y'all. Y'all talking about justice, I'm going to tell y'all about justice.
if we don't pay attention to a poor child's education, their housing, how their parents might be able to get to all of those pieces, we're going to fail. This is where I think foundations have an enormous role in ensuring that there is a pressure and an institutionalization of these partnerships.
I am now helping Obama meet his import goal of doubling exports because Oakland is the only port that exports more than imports. And I'm more likely to get investments from a Chinese developer in some of these tougher parts of Oakland than I am from American investors.
For the first time in anybody's memory, the Secretary of Transportation meets with the Secretary of HUD, meets with the Secretary or the Administrator of the EPA every several weeks, every 3 or 4 weeks, so that if you're applying for $500 million for transportation, you better have affordable housing around your light rail stop. They're running government like a business.
I'm going to ask for the first question from Bruce Katz.
Okay, well, I was in the middle of a tweet. So you just...
It seems to me that there must be innovations that enable excluded communities to actually own and control some of these new forms of green economy opportunities.
The just city becoming more synonymous with the just worker or the just employer? And if so, what's the role of geography in that kind of discussion?
In the 1930s, my dad had no papers, but he had a union defending his rights. And when he came back from the war, there was a GI Bill, which meant that he could buy a house in an inner ring suburb, and he was able to go from being a janitor to being an air conditioner repairman, and we went from being poor to being working class. And I went to decent public schools because we were investing in them as a society, and that's the American story.
Cities have to be a part of the revival of the American dream.
When you're mayor, you're in a lot of private rooms, private meetings, where if you don't have inclusion and equality as a part of who you are, then you can easily get away from it. You know, I say all of the time that being mayor is really where hope meets the street.
So in closing, and in keeping with the theme of this year's conference, a new world, I really want to challenge us to think of, creating a new urbanism that really integrates equity and inclusion as core values and not just add-ons to how we're thinking about rebuilding the urban environment. And I'd like to end with a quote from one of my idols, Mayor Mitch Landrieu from New Orleans, who knows a thing or two about change. And he says in his inauguration address, "Change does not begin in the palace of the Pope, the halls of Congress, the rose-petaled garden of the White House, or the marbled walls of a Wall Street boardroom. Change, real change, transformative change, enduring change comes from the streets. Change starts here, change starts now, and I look forward to working with you along that change process." Thank you.